Book 14. Book 14. Book 14. Argument. Atrides to behold the skirmish brings old Nestor and the other wounded kings. Juno, receiving of the Cyprian dame her ceston, whence her sweet enticements came, descends to Somnus and gets him to bind the powers of Jove with sleep. The powers of Jove with sleep, to free her mind. Neptune assists the Greeks, and of the foe slaughter inflicts a mighty overthrow. The Greeks, and of the foe slaughter inflicts a mighty overthrow. Ajax so sore strikes Hector with a stone, it makes him spit blood, and his sense sets gone. Spit blood, and his sense sets gone. I don't know how to pronounce this. I know how to pronounce the letter when it's written in Greek, ancient Greek, but I don't know how the English pronunciation of the letter is. Of the name of the letter, I should say. Xi? Okay. It does seem to be Xi. Zai. This one's saying. Okay. I'm going to say Zai sounds more like something that would be in Latin. All right, we're going to go with Zai. Oh, that took longer than it should have. Makes him spit blood, and his sense gets gone. Another argument. In Zai with sleep and bed. In Zai with sleep and bed, heaven's queen, even Jove himself makes overseen. In Zai with sleep and bed, heaven's queen, even Jove himself makes overseen. Overseen. Book 14. Not wine nor feasts could lay their soft chains on old Nestor's ear, to this high clamor who required Machaon's thoughts to bear. Not wine nor feasts could lay their soft chains on old Nestor's ear, to this high clamor who required Machaon's thoughts to bear his care in part. About the cause. All right, let's pull some of the names we're going to need here. Definitely Nestor. I'm pretty sure he calls in Agamemnon and all the kings. Probably Diomedes speaks up. Maybe this is when Odysseus gets upset at Agamemnon. Definitely Hera and Zeus. Or rather, Juno and Jupiter. And that'll be good for now. O gods, our Greek earth. His care in part about the cause. For me think still, said he, the cry increases. I must needs the watchtower mount, to see which way the flood of war doth drive. Still drink thou wine. Still drink thou wine, and eat, till fair-haired Hecamed hath given a little water heat to cleanse the quitcher from thy wound. A little water heat to cleanse the quitcher from thy wound. To cleanse the quitcher from thy wound. This said, the goodly shield of warlike Thrasymed, his son, who had his own in field, he took, snatched up a mighty lance, and so stepped forth to view cause of that clamor. Instantly, the unworthy cause he knew. The Grecians wholly put in rout, the Trojans routing still, the Grecians wholly put in rout, the Trojans routing still, close at the Greeks' backs, their wall raised. The old man mourned this ill, and as when with unwieldy waves the great sea forefeels winds that both ways murmur, and no way her certain current finds, but pants and swells confusedly, here goes and there will stay, till on it air casts one firm wind, and then it rolls away. So stood old Nestor in debate, two thoughts at once on wing in his discourse. If first to take direct course to the king, or in the multitude to fight. At last he did conclude to visit Agamemnon first. Meantime both hosts to visit Agamemnon first. Meantime, both hosts imbrued their steel in one another's blood. Meantime, both hosts imbrued their steel in one another's blood. Not wrought their healths, but harms, swords, huge stones, double-headed darts, still thumping on their arms. And now the Jove thumping on their arms. And now the Jove-kept kings, whose wounds were yet in cure, still thumping on their arms. Double-headed darts still thumping on their arms. And now the Jove-kept kings, whose wounds were yet in cure, did meet old Nestor, Diomed, Ithacus, and Atreus' son from fleet bent for fight, which was far off, and Atreus' son from fleet did meet old Nestor, Diomed, Ithacus, and Atreus' son, from fleet bent for fight, which was far off, the ships being drawn to shore on heaps at first, till all their sterns a wall was raised before, which, though not great, it yet sufficed to hide them, though their men were something straitened, for whose scope and form of battle then they drew them through the spacious shore, one by another still, till all the bosom of the strand their sable bulks did fill, even till they took up all the space twixt both the promontories. These kings, like Nestor, in desire to know for what those cries began. These kings, like Nestor, in desire to know for what those cries became so violent, came along, all leaning on their darts to see, though not of power to fight. Leaning on their darts to see, though not of power to fight, sad and suspicious hearts distempering them, and meeting now Nestor, the king in fear, cried out, "Argives, for shame, contain!" The king in fear cried out, "O Nestor, our renown, why shows thy presence here, the harmful fight abandoned? Now Hector will make good the threatening vow he made. I fear that till he had our blood and fight. Threatening vow he made, I fear, that till good the threatening vow he made, I fear, that till he had our Hector will make good the threatening vow he made, I fear, that till he had our blood and fired our fleet, he never more would turn to Ilion. Nor is it long, I see, before his whole will be done. O gods, I now see all the Greeks put on Achilles' ire against my honor. I now see all the Greeks put on Achilles' ire against my honor. No mean left to keep our fleet from fire. My honor, no mean left to keep our fleet from fire. He answered, "'Tis an evident truth." O gods, our fleet from fire. He answered, "'Tis an evident truth, not Jove himself can know. Not Jove himself can now, with all the thunder in his hands, prevent our overthrow. The wall we thought invincible and trusted more than Jove is scaled and raised, entered, and our powers driven up past breathing, prove a most inevitable fight. Fight. Both slaughters so commixed that for your life you cannot put your diligence thought betwixt the Greeks and Trojans, as close for their throats. Diligence thought betwixt the Greeks and Trojans, and as close their throats cleave to the sky. Consult we then Consult we then, if that will serve. For fight advise not I. It fits not. For fight advise not I. It fits not wounded men to fight. Atrides answered him, if such a wall as cost the Greeks so many a tired limb, and such a dike be passed and raised, that, as yourself said well, we all esteemed invincible, and would past doubt repel the world from both our fleet and us, it doth directly show that here Jove vows our shame and deaths. I evermore did know his hand from ours, when he helped us, and now I see as clear that like the blessed gods, he holds our hated enemies dear, supports their arms and pinions ours. Conclude then, 'tis in vain to strive with him. Conclude then, 'tis in vain to strive with him. Conclude then, 'tis in vain to strive with him. Our ships drawn up now, let us launch again, and keep at anchor till come night, that then, perhaps, our foes may calm their storms, and in that time our scape we may dispose. It is not any shame to fly from ill, although by night, we may dispose. It is not any shame to fly from ill, although by night. It is not any shame to fly from ill, although by night. And in that time our scape we may dispose. It is not any shame to fly from ill. It is not any shame to fly from ill, although by night known. To shame to fly from ill, although by night known ill he better does that flies than he that takes in fight. Known ill he better does that flies than he that takes in fight. Flies than he that takes in fight. Ulysses frowned on him and said, Chryses, the mighty king of men. I think I have an angry Ulysses one here. Yeah. Thou art base, and both in power and skill. Takes in fight. Ulysses frowned on him and said, Accursed, why talk'st thou thus? Would thou hadst led some... Accursed, why talk'st thou thus? Would thou hadst led some barbarous host, and not commanded us, whom Jove made soldiers from our youth, that age might scorn to fly from any charge it undertakes, and every dazzled eye the honored hand of war might close. Thus wouldst thou leave this town, for which our many miseries felt entitled it our own. Peace, lest some other Greek give ear, and hear a sentence such as no man's palate should profane, at least thou knew how much his right own. At least thou knew how much his right should profane. At least that knew how much his right owed. That knew how much his own right weighed. And being a prince, and such a prince as bears rule of so many, should profane. At least that knew how much his own right weighed, and being a prince, and such a prince as bears rule of so many Greeks as thou. This counsel loathes mine ears. Let others toil and fight and cries, and we so light of heels upon their very noise and groans to hoist away our keel. And let others toil and fight and cries, and we so light of heels. and we so light of heels upon their very noise and groans to hoist away our keels. Thus we should fit the wish of Troy, that being somewhere near the victory we give it clear, and we were sure to bear a slaughter to the utmost man. For no man will sustain a stroke, the fleet gone, but at that look still, and wish him slain. And therefore, Prince of men, be sure thy censure is unfit. Prince of men, and therefore, Prince of men, be sure thy censure is unfit. O Ithacus, replied the king, thy better terms have smit my heart in sunder. At no hand 'gainst any prince's will do I command this. Would to God that any man of skill to give a better counsel would, or bold, or younger man any man of skill to give a better counsel would, or bold, or younger man, my voice should gladly go with his. Then Diomed began. Suppress thine anger's powers, good friend, and hear why I refrained. Should gladly go with his. Then Diomed began. The man not far is, nor shall ask much but labor to bring in, that willingly would speak his thoughts, if spoken they might win fit ear, and suffer no impair, that I discover them, being youngest of you, since my sire fit ear, and suffer no impair, that I discover them, being youngest of you, since my sire heired a diadem, may make my speech. The man not far is, nor shall ask much labor to bring in, that willingly would speak his thoughts, if spoken they might win fit ear, and suffer no impair, that I discover them. Impair, that I discover them. Being youngest of you, since my sire heired a diadem, may make my speech to diadems decent enough, though he lies in his sepulchre at Thebes. I boast this pedigree. Portheus 3 famous sons begot in high. Are we on the book 14 guide here? Portheus, okay. Pluron, Calydon, Agrius, Malus, Aeneas. Okay, that's good. Though he lies in his sepulchre at Thebes. I boast this pedigree. Portheus 3 famous sons begot, that in high Calydon and Pluron kept, with state of kings, their habitation. 3 famous sons begot, that in high Calydon and Pluron kept, with state of kings, their habitation. Agrius, Malus, and the third the horseman Aeneas, my father's father, that excelled in actions generous, the other two. My father's father, that excelled in actions generous the other two. But these kept home, my father being driven with wandering and adventurous spirits. For so the King of Heaven and the other gods set down their wills, and he to Argos came, where he began the world. To Argos came, where he began the world, and dwelt. There marrying a dame, one of Adrastus' female race, he that kept a female race. He kept a royal house, where he had great domains, good lands, and being industrious, he planted many orchard grounds about his house, and bred great store of sheep. Besides all this, he was well qualitied, and passed all Argives for his spear. And these digressive things are such as you may well endure, since, being derived from kings, and kings not poor, not virtueless, you cannot hold me base, nor scorn my words, which oft, though true, in mean men meet disgrace. However, they are these, in short. Let us be seen at fight, and yield to strong necessity, though wounded, that our sight may set those men. Let us be seen at fight, and yield to strong necessity, though wounded, that our sight may set those men that on. May set those men on that of late have to Achilles' spleen been too indulgent, and left blows. But be we only seen, not come within the reach of darts, lest wound on wound we lay, but we be only seen, not come within the reach of darts, lest wound on wound we lay, which Reverend Nestor's speech implied, and so far him obey. This counsel gladly all observed, went on, Atrides led. Nor Neptune this advantage lost, but closely followed, and like an aged man appeared to Atrides, whose right hand he seized and said. All right, let's pull in Neptune's voice. Father of gods, will any man? Right hand he seized and said, Atrides, this doth passing fitly stand. Whose right hand he seized and said, Atrides, this doth passing fitly stand with stern Achilles' wreakful spirit, that he can stand astern his ship, and both in fight and death the Grecian bane discern, since not in his breast glows one spark of any human mind, but be that his bane. Let God by that loss make him find how vile a thing. Let God by that loss make him find how vile a thing he is. For now the blessed gods have not given thee ever over, but perhaps the Trojans may from heaven receive that justice. But perhaps the Trojans may from heaven receive that justice. Nay, 'tis sure, and thou shalt see their falls. See that justice. Nay, 'tis sure, and thou shalt see their falls. Your fleet soon freed, and for fights here they glad to take their walls. Your fleet soon freed, and for fights here they glad to take their walls. This said, he made known who he was, and parted with a cry, as if 10,000 men had joined in battle then. So high his throat flew through the host. This said, he made known who he was, and parted with a cry, as if 10,000 men had joined in battle then. So high his throat flew through the host. And so this great earth-shaking god cheered up the Greek hearts, that they wished their pains no period. Saturnia from Olympus top, that they wished their pains no period. Saturnia from Olympus top saw her great brother there. Saturnia from Olympus top saw her great brother there. And her great husband. Olympus top saw her great brother there, and her great husband's brother there, and her great husband's brother too. Saw her great brother there, and her great husband's brother too, exciting everywhere the glorious spirits of the Greeks, which, as she joyed to see, so on the fountful Ida's top, Jove's sight did disagree with her content. Fountful Ida's top, Jove's sight did disagree with her contentment, since she feared that his hand would descend and check the sea god's practices. And this she did contend how to prevent. And this she did contend how to prevent, which thus seemed best: to deck her curiously and visit the Idalian hill. Probably Idalian? Idalian. Seemed best to deck her curiously and visit the Idalian hill, that so the lightener's eye she might enamor with her looks, and his high temples steep, even to his wisdom, in the kind and golden juice of sleep. So took she chamber, which her son the god of Ferrari, Ferrary, Ferrari? It seems like it wants to be pronounced Ferrari within this. Ferrari. Of iron / belonging to iron or smithwork. I wonder if Ferrari car name is taken from that. Interesting. Apparently Ferrari, the Italian name, which the car company is based on, the name itself is taken from the root of, I guess, an Italian word that also means iron or blacksmith, which means the Italian would have been itself taken from the Greek. So in a very roundabout way, yes, Ferrari car company is inspired by that. Even to his wisdom in the kind and golden juice of sleep. So took she chamber, which her son the god of Ferrari, with firm doors made, being joined close, and with a privy key that no god could command but Jove, where entered but Jove, where entered, and with a privy key that no god could command but Jove, where... Okay. So took she chamber, which her son, the god of Ferrary, with firm doors made, being joined close, and with a privy key that no god could command but Jove. Where entered, she made fast the shining gates, and then upon her lovely body cast ambrosia, that first made it clear, and after laid on it an odorous, rich, and sacred... laid on it an odorous, rich... and after laid on it an odorous, rich, and sacred oil, that was so wondrous sweet, that ever, when it was but touched, it sweetened heaven and earth. Her body being cleansed with this, her tresses she let forth, and combed, her comb dipped in the oil, then wrapped them up in curls, and thus her deathless head adorned. A heavenly veil she hurls on her white shoulders, and thus her deathless head adorned. A heavenly veil she hurls on her white shoulders, wrought by her that rules in housewiferys. Who wove it full of antique works, of most divine device, and this with goodly clasps of gold she fastened to her breast. Then with a girdle, whose rich sphere 100 studs impressed, she girt her small waist. In her ears tenderly pierced she wore pearls great and orient. On her head a wreath not worn before cast out beams like the sun. At last she to her feet did tie fair shoes, and thus entire attired she shined in open sky. At last to her feet did tie fair shoes, and thus entire attired she shined in open sky. Called the fair Paphian queen, she shined in open sky. Called the fair Paphian queen apart from the other gods, and said, Open sky. Called the fair Paphian queen apart from the other gods, and said, Apart from the other gods, and said. All right, we're going to have to pull in Venus as well after this. But for now, it is Juno. Who is that, thou craftiest? The other gods, and said, Loved daughter, and said, Loved daughter, should I ask a grace? Should I? Loved daughter, and said, Loved daughter, should I ask a grace? Should I, or be obeyed? Or wouldst thou cross me, being incensed, since I cross thee and take the Greek's part, thy hand helping Troy? She answered, Madame, my lord calls for you. She answered, That shall make no difference in a different cause. That shall make no difference in a different cause. Ask, ancient deity, what most contents thee. My mind stands inclined as liberally to grant it as thine own to ask. Provided that it be a favor fit and in my power. She, given deceitfully, thus said, Then give me those two powers with which both men and gods thou vanquishest, love and desire. For now the periods of all the many feeding earth, and the original of all the gods, Ocean. Okay, I think I pronounced it as Oceanus in this. Even though if it was more inspired by ancient Greek, it would be more similar to Oceanus, but that doesn't really make sense. Oceanus, I'm saying it as. I believe it's Okeanos, in ancient Greek. Or okeanos. Okay. The many-feeding earth and the original of all the gods, Oceanus and Tethys, whom we call our mother. Ah, there's a typo in this edition of Chapman, and it types it as Thetis, which is the mother of Achilles, but it should be Tethys. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix that, I guess. It's definitely not Oceanus and Thetis. For now the periods of all the many-feeding earth, and the original of all the gods, Oceanus and Tethys, whom we call our mother, I am going to greet. They nursed me in their court, and brought me up, receiving me in most respectful sort from Phia, when Jove under earth and the unfruitful seas cast Saturn. These I go to see, intending to appease jars grown betwixt them, having long abstained from speech and bed, which jars could I so reconcile that in their anger's stead I could place Jove, love, and so renew their first society. I should their best love be esteemed and honored endlessly. She answered, Madame, my lord calls for you. And honored endlessly. I should their best love be esteemed and honored endlessly. She answered, 'Tis not fit nor just that they 'Tis not fit nor just thy will should be denied, whom Jove in his embrace holds. This spoken, she untied, and from her odorous bosom took her ceston, in whose sphere were all enticements to delight, all loves, all longings were, kind conference, fair speech, whose power the wisest doth inflame. This she resigning to her hands, thus urged her by her name. Receive this bridle, thus fair wrought, and put it twixt thy breasts, where all things to be done are done. And whatsoever rests in thy desire, return with it. The great-eyed Juno smiled, and put it twixt her breasts. Love's queen, betwixt her breasts. Love's queen, thus cunningly beguiled, to Jove's court flew. Saturnia, straight stooping from heaven's height, Pyrrha and Amathia, whose Hold on, let's check this. I think it's Pieria. And Amathia. Thoas, Thracian, Lemnos. Okay, we're good. Mulciber. Stooping from heaven's height, to Jove's court flew. Saturnia, to Jove's court flew. Saturnia, straight stooping from heaven's height, to Jove's court flew. Saturnia, straight stooping from heaven's height, Pieria and Amathia, those countries of delight soon reached, and to the snowy mounts where Thracian soldiers dwell, approaching, past their tops untouched. past their tops untouched. From Athos then she fell, past all the broad sea, and arrived in Lemnos, at the towers of godlike Thoas, where she met the prince of all men's powers, death's brother, Sleep, whose hand she took, and said, Thou king of men, prince of the gods too, if before thou heard'st my suits, again give helpful ear, and through all times I'll offer thanks to thee, lay slumber on Jove's fiery eyes, offer thanks to thee, lay slumber on Jove's fiery eyes, that I may comfort me, that I may comfort me with his embraces, that I may comfort me with his embraces, for which grace I'll grace thee with a throne incorruptible, all of gold, and elegantly done by Mulciber, to which he forged a footstool for the ease of thy soft feet, when wine and feasts thy golden humors please. All right, we need a voice for Sleep. It's 49:30. And feasts thy golden humors please. Saturnia, there lives not any god besides Jove, but I would be calm. Aye, if it were the flood that fathers all the deities, the great Oceanus. All right, that's probably good. Thy golden humors please. Sweet Sleep replied, Saturnia, there lives not any god besides Jove. There lives not any god besides Jove, but I would be calm. Aye, if it were the flood that fathers all the deities, the great Oceanus, but Jove, we dare not come more near than he commandeth us. Now you command me as you did when Jove's great-minded son, Alcides, having sacked the town of stubborn Ilion, took sail from thence, when by your charge I poured about Jove's mind a pleasing slumber, calming him till thou dravest up the wind. In all his cruelties to sea, that set his son ashore in Kos. Okay, he writes Kos as Cous. I'm still going to do that as, I'll say Kos here. I guess it's closer to the Greek anyway. Dravest up the wind in all his cruelties to the sea, that set his son ashore in Kos, far from all his friends, which waking vexed so sore the supreme Godhead, that he cast the gods about the sky, and me above them all he sought, whom he had utterly hurled from the sparkling firmament, if all God's taming night, whom flying I besought for aid, had suffered his despite, and not preserved me, but his wrath with my offense dispensed, for fear to offend her. But his wrath with my offense and preserved me. But his wrath with my offense dispensed, for fear to offend her, and so ceased, though never so incensed. And now another such escape you wish I should prepare. And now another such escape you wish I should prepare. And now another such escape you wish I should prepare. And now another such escape you wish I... And now another such escape you wish I should prepare. She answered, What hath thy deep rest to do with his deep care, as though Jove's love to Iliad in all degrees were such as 'twas to Iliad in all degrees were such as 'twas to Hercules his son, and would his degrees were such as was to Hercules his son, and would so storm as much for their displeasure as his? Away, I'll remove thy fear, with giving thee the dame that thou didst ever love, one of the fair young graces, divine passeth thee. All right, here it should probably be pronounced passeth thee. Because of the way that Chapman spells it. Didst ever love. Fear with giving thee the divine dame that thou didst ever love. Away, I will remove thy fear with giving thee the dame that thou didst ever love, one of the fair young graces born, divine passeth thee. Divine passeth thee. This startled Somnus into joy, who answered, Swear to me, by those inviolable springs that feed the Stygian lake, with one hand touching the Stygian lake, with one hand touch the nourishing earth, and in the other take the marble sea, that all the gods of the infernal state which circle Saturn may to us be witnesses, and rate what thou hast vowed, that with all truth thou wilt bestow on me the dame I grant I ever loved, divine passeth thee. The dame I grant I ever loved, the dame I grant I ever loved, divine passeth thee. I ever loved, divine passeth thee. She swore as he enjoined in all. She swore as he enjoined in all, and strengthened all his joys by naming all the infernal gods, surnamed the Titanoids. By naming all the infernal gods, surnamed the Titanoids. Surnamed the Titanoids. Surnamed the Titanoids. The oath thus taken, both took way, and made their quick repair to Ida from the town and isle, all hid in liquid air. At Lecton first they left the sea. And there the land they trod, the fountful nurse of savages, with all her woods did nod beneath their feet. There Somnus stayed, lest Jove's bright eye should see, and yet, that he might see to Jove, he climbed the goodliest tree that all the Idalian mountain bred, and crowned her progeny, mountain bred, and crowned her progeny. A fir it was, that shot past air and kissed the burning sky. There sate he in his dark arms. There sate he hid in his dark arms, and in the shape withal of that continual prating bird, whom all the deities call Calchas, but men Cymindis name. Calchas. Cymindis. Gargarus. Okay, good. That all dark arms, and with the shape withal of that continual prating bird, whom all the deities call Calchas, but men Cymindis name. Saturnia tripped apace up to the top of Gargarus and showed her heavenly face to Jupiter, who saw and loved and with as hot a fire, being curious in her tempting view, as when with first desire, the pleasure of it being stolen, they mixed in love and bed. And gazing on her still, he said. Okay, Jupiter. And my power to give it act approve, how vain her strife is. Gazing on her still, he said, Saturnia, what hath bred this haste in thee from our high court? And whither tends thy gait, that, void of horse and chariot fit for thy sovereign state, thou lackest here? He studied. Here. Her studied fraud replied. My journey now leaves state and labor to do good, and where in right I owe all kindness to the sire of gods, and our mother queen, that nursed and kept me curiously in court, since both have been a long time at discord. My desire is to atone their hearts, and therefore go I now to see those earth's extremest parts, for whose far seat I spared my horse the scaling of this hill, and left them at the foot of it. For they must taste their fill of travail with me, that must draw my coach through earth and seas, whose far intended reach respect and care not to displease thy graces, made me not attempt without thy gracious leave. Travail with me, that must draw my coach through earth and seas, whose far intended reach respect and care not to displease thy graces, made me not attempt without thy gracious leave. The cloud-compelling god her guile in this sort did receive. Her guile in this sort did receive. In this sort did receive. Juno, thou shalt have after leave, but ere so far thou stray, convert we our kind thoughts to love, that now doth every way circle with victory my powers, nor yet with any dame, woman, or goddess did his fires my bosom so inflame as now with thee. Not when it loved the parts so generous Ixion's wife had, that brought forth the wise Pirithous, nor when the lovely dame Acrisius' daughter stirred my amorous powers, that Perseus bore to all men else preferred. Nor when the dame that Phoenix got surprised me with her sight, who the divine-souled Radamanth and Minos brought to light, nor Semele that bore to me the joy of mortal men, the sprightly Bacchus, nor the dame that Thebes renowned then, Alcmena, that bore Hercules, Latona so renowned, Queen Ceres with the golden hair, nor thy fair eyes did wound my entrails to such depth as now with thirst of amorous ease. Nor thy fair eyes did wound my entrails to such depth to such depth as now with thirst of amorous ease. The cunning dame seemed much incensed, and said, What words are these? What words are these? What words are these, unsufferable Saturn's son? What, here, in Ida's height, desirest thou this? How fits us? Of what? How fits us? How fits us? Or what if in the sight of any god thy will were pleased, that he the rest might bring to witness thy incontinence? 'Twere a dishonored thing. I would not show my face in heaven, and rise from such a bed. But if love be so dear to thee, thou hast a chamber-stead. Be so dear to thee, but would not rise from such a bed. But if love be so dear to thee, thou hast a chamber-stead, which Vulcan purposely contrived with all fit secrecy, there sleep at pleasure. All fit secrecy, there sleep at pleasure. He replied, I fear not if the eye of either god or man observe. So thick a cloud of gold I'll cast about us, that the sun who furthest can behold shall never find us. This resolved, into his kind embrace he took his wife. Beneath them both fair This resolved, into his kind embrace he took his wife. Beneath them both fair Tellus strewed the place with fresh sprung. Beneath them both fair Tellus strewed the place with fresh sprung herbs, so soft and thick that up aloft it bore their heavenly bodies. With his leaves did dewy lotus store the Elysian mountain. Saffron flowers and hyacinths helped make the sacred bed. And there they slept. When suddenly there brake a golden vapor out of air, whence shining dews did fall, in which they wrapped them close, and slept till Jove was tamed withal. Slept them close, and wrapped them, in which they wrapped them close, and slept till Jove was tamed withal. And slept till Jove was tamed withal. Mean space Somnus flew to the ships, found Neptune. Mean space Somnus flew to mean space withal. Mean space flew Somnus to the ships, found Neptune out, and said, Now cheerfully assist the Greeks, and give them glorious head, at least a little, while Jove sleeps, of whom through every limb I poured dark sleep. Saturnia's love hath so eluded him. This news made Neptune more secure in giving the Grecians. This news made Neptune more secure in giving Grecians heart, and through the first fights then he stirred. The men of most desert. Father of gods, of most desert. Yet, Grecians, shall we put our ships and conquest in the hands of Priam's Hector by our sloth? He thinks so, and commands with pride according. All because Achilles keeps away. Alas, as we were Alas, as we were naught but him. Alas, as we were naught but him. We little needs to stay of his assistance, if we would our own strengths call to field, and mutually maintain repulse. Come on then, all men yield to what I order. To what I order. We that bear best arms in all our host, whose heads sustain the brightest helms, whose hands are bristled most with longest lances, let us on. But stay, I'll lead you. Are bristled most with longest lances, let us on. But stay, I'll lead you all. Nor think I but great Hector's spirits will suffer some appall, though they be never so inspired. The ablest of us then, that on our shoulders worst shields bear, exchange with worser men, that fight with better. This proposed, all heard it, and obeyed. The kings, even those that suffered wounds, Ulysses, Diomed, and Agamemnon, helped to instruct the complete army thus. To give good. The complete army thus. The good gave good arms, worse. The complete army thus. To good gave good arms, worse to worse, yet none were mutinous. Thus armed with order, forth they flew. The great Earthshaker led, a long sword in his sinewy hand, which, when he brandished, it lightened still. There was no law for him and it, poor men must quake before them. These thus manned, illustrious Hector then his host brought up. The blue-haired god and he stretched through the prease, a grievous fight. When to the ships and tents of Greece the seas break loose, a grievous fight. When to the ships and tents of Greece the seas break loose and raged. But when they joined, the dreadful clamor rose to such a height as not the sea when up the North Spirit blows her raging billows so against the beaten shore, nor such a rustling keeps a fire, driven with violent blow through woods that grow against a hill, nor so the fervent strokes of almost bursting winds resound against the grove of oaks, as did the clamor of these hosts when both the battles closed. Of all which noble Hector first at Ajax' breast disposed his javelin. Since so right on him the great-souled soldier bore. Nor missed it, but the baldricks both that his broad bosom wore, to hang his shield and sword it struck, both which his flesh To hang his sword and shield it struck, both which his flesh preserved. Hector, disdaining that his lance had thus as good as swerved, trode to his strength. But going off, great Ajax with a stone, one of the many props for ships that there lay trampled on, struck his broad breast above his shield, just underneath his throat, and shook him piecemeal, when the stone sprang back again and smote earth like a whirlwind. Gathering dust with whirring fiercely round, for fervor of his when the stones sprung back again and smote earth like a whirlwind, gathering dust with whirring fiercely round, for fervor of his unspent strength in settling on the ground. When the stones sprung back again and smote earth like a whirlwind, gathering dust with whirring fiercely round, for fervor of his unspent strength in settling on the ground, as when Jove's bolt by the roots rends from the earth and oak, his sulphur casting with the blow a strong unsavory smoke, and on the fallen plant none dare look but with amazed eyes. Jove's thunder being no laughing game. So bowed strong Hector's thighs, and so with tossed up heels he fell. Away his lance he flung, his round shield followed, then his helm, and out his armor. His round shield followed, then his helm, and out his armor rung. The Greeks then shouted and ran in, and hoped to hale him off, and therefore poured on darts in storms to keep his aid aloof. But none could hurt the people's guide, nor stir him from the ground. Sarpedon, prince of Lycia, and Glaucus so renowned, divine Agenor, so renowned, divine Agenor, Venus' son, and Glaucus so renowned, divine Agenor, Venus' son, and wise Polydamas rushed to his rescue, and the rest. No one neglective was of Hector's safety. All their shields they couched about him close, raised from earth, and giving him in their kind arms repose from off the labor carried him to his rich chariot, and bore him mourning towards Troy. But when the flood they got of gulfy Xanthus, that was got by deathless Jupiter, there took they him from chariot, and all besprinkled there his temples with the stream. He breathed, looked up, essayed to rise, and on his knees stayed, spitting blood. Again then closed his eyes, and back again his body fell. The main blow had not done yet with his spirit. When the Greeks saw worthy body fell. The main blow had not done yet with his spirit. When the Greeks saw worthy Hector gone, then thought they of their work, and charged with more cheer the foe. And then far first Iliades began the overthrow. He darted Satnius, Enops' son, whom famous Nius bore. Satnius. Neus. Enops. Prothanor. Aurelikides. Aurelicides. Panthides. And then Panthides seized Prothenor Areilikides with his revengeful spear. Okay. Worthy Hector gone, then thought they of their work, then charged with much more cheer the foe, and then far first Oiliades began the overthrow. He darted Satnius, Enop's son, whom famous Neus bore, when she was keeping Enop's flocks on Satnius river shore, and struck him in his belly's rim, who upwards fell, and raised a mighty skirmish with his fall. And then Panthides seized Prothenor Areilikides with his revengeful spear. It seems weird. I would probably say Aurelicides. I'll keep it. Panthides seized Prothenor Areilikides with his revengeful spear on his right shoulder, struck it through, and laid him breathless there. For which he insolently bragged and cried out. Trying to figure out who's saying this next line. It's not Ajax Oiliades, or is it? Panthides would be, damn. The son of Panthus. A Euphorbus. Okay, I don't think we have a Euphorbus voice. No. With his revengeful spear on his right shoulder, struck it through, and laid him breathless there, for which he insolently bragged and cried out, Not a dart from great-souled Panthus' son, I think, shall ever vainly part, but some Greek's bosom it shall take, and make him give his ghost. Okay, Euphorbus. All right. But not a dart from great-souled Panthus' son, I think, shall ever vainly part, but some Greek's bosom it shall take, and make him give his ghost. and make him give his ghost. This brag the Grecians stomached much, but Telamonius most, who stood most near Prothenor's fall. Telamonius most, who stood most near Prothenor's fall, and out he sent a lance, which Panthus' son declining scaped, yet took it to sad chance Archilochus, Antenor's son, whom heaven did destinate, that stern Antenor's son, whom heaven did destinate to that stern end. Twixt neck and head the javelin wrought his fate, and ran in at the upper joint of all the back long bone, cut both the nerves, and such a load of strength laid Ajax on, cut both the nerves, and such a load of strength laid Ajax on, as that small part he seized, outweighed all the under limbs, and struck his heels up, so that head and face the earth's possession took, when all the low parts sprung in air. Laid Ajax on, as that small part he seized, outweighed all the under limbs, and struck his heels up, so that head and face the earth's possession took. When all the low parts sprung in air, and thus did Ajax quit, Panthides brave. Let's pull in Ajax's voice. I'm pretty sure I could do it off the top of my head, but since we have him, we might as well use him. Oh, friends, sprung in air, and thus did Ajax quit Panthides brave. Now, Panthus' son, let thy prophetic wit consider and disclose a truth. If this man do not weigh even with Prothenor, I conceive no one of you will say that he was either base himself or sprung of any base, Antenor's brother or his son he should be. Antenor's brother or his son he should be by his face. One of his race, past question. Any base, Antenor's brother or his son he should be by his face. One of his race, past question, his likeness shows he is. This spake he, knowing it well enough. The Trojans. This spake he, knowing it well enough. The Trojans stormed at this, and then slew Acamas. To save his brother yet engaged, Boeotius, dragging him to spoil. And thus the Greeks enraged. Is it saying Acamas is the one speaking? Yeah, because Acamas hasn't been killed yet. I'm pretty sure a character named Acamas dies like 3 times in the story. So it's hard to keep track of him in particular. But let's say this is a voice of Acamas then. It's definitely not Ajax's voice who just spoke. And I don't think it's Euphorbus. The Trojans stormed at this, and then slew Acamas to save his brother yet engaged, Boeotius. To save his brother yet engaged, Boeotius dragging him to spoil, and thus the Greeks enraged. O Greeks, even born to bear our darts, yet ever breathing threats. Not always under tears and toils you see our fortune sweats, but sometimes you drop under death. See now you're quick among our dead, entranced with my weak lance, to prove I have ere long revenged my brother. 'Tis the wish of every honest man, his brother slain in Mars's field may rest wreaked in his fane. Okay, let's just take a closer look at this. All right, I think that was Akamus. In Mars's field may rest wreaked in his fane. This stirred fresh envy in the Greeks, but urged Peneleus most. I think I gave Peneleus a different... Nope, Peneleus. Okay. Envy in the Greeks, but urged Peneleus most. Who hurled his lance at Akamus. He escaped, nor yet it lost the force he gave it, for it found the flock-rich Phorba's son. Phorba? I can't imagine that would be pronounced any other way. I don't have it written down, but... It's probably Phorbas apostrophe S, not Phorba apostrophe S. Ailionius. Hermes, Peneleus. Okay. I'm running out of tape on this machine here, or tape, whatever you call it, digital space. But we're almost at the end of the chapter, so we should be good. Nor yet it who hurled his lance at Akamus. He escaped, nor yet it lost the force he gave it, for it found the flock-rich Phorba's son, Ailionius, Ilionius is how I did it here. Rich Phorba's son, Ilionius, whose dear sire, past all in Ilion, was loved of Hermes, and enriched, and to him only bore his mother now. The flock-rich Phorba's son, Ilionius, whose dear sire, past all in Ilion, was loved of Hermes, and enriched, and to him only bore his mother, this now slaughtered man. The dart did undergore his eyelid, by his eye's dear roots, and out the apple fell. The eye pierced through, and out the apple fell, the eye pierce through. Nor could the nerve that stays the neck repel his strong winged lance. But neck and all gave way, and down he dropped. Peneleus then unsheathed his sword, and from the shoulders chopped his luckless head, which down he threw, the helm still sticking on, and still the lance fixed in his eye, which not to see alone contented with him, but up again he snatched. And showed it all with this stern brave. But up again he snatched, and showed it all with this stern brave. Okay, this would be Peneleus. Peneleus. Ilians, relate. Okay. With this stern brave. Ilians. And showed it all with this stern brave. Ilians, relate brave Ilionius. Relate brave Ilioneus. Relate brave Ilioneus fall to his kind parents, that their roofs may their tears may overrun. To his kind parents, that their roofs may. Ilians, relate brave Ilioneus fall to his kind parents, that their roofs their tears may overrun. For so the house of Promachus and Alegenor's son. I don't have this one. Alegenor? It's got to be Alegenor, right? Alegenor. I'll say Alegenor. Hirtius Gertiades? Gertiades. Hippotion Morris? Hippotian. Hyperinor. Okay. Antilochus Falces? Falces and Murmur? Those are probably abbreviated names. I don't recognize them from other translations. Or at least Murmur. Okay, we're coming up to a bunch of names here. Their tears may overrun, for so the house of Promachus and Alegenor's son. For so the house of Promachus and Alegenor's son must with his Alegenor's son must with his wife's eyes overflow, she never seeing more her dear lord, though we tell his death. Dear lord, though we tell his death, when to our native shore we bring from ruined Troy our fleet, and men so long forgone. This said and seen, pale fear possessed all those of Ilion, and every man cast round his eye to see where death was not, that he might fly him. Let not then his graced hand be forgot, O Muses. Might fly him. Let not then his graced hand be forgot, O Muses, you that dwell in heaven, that first imbued the field with Trojan spoil, when Neptune thus had made their irons yield. First Ajax Telamonius, the Mysian captain, slew. Great Hirtius Gertiates. Antilochus overthrew Phalces and Murmur to their spoil. Captain slew great Hirtius Gertiates. First Ajax Telamonius, the Mysian captain, slew. Great Hirtius Gertiates. Antilochus overthrew Phalces and Murmur to their spoil. Meriones gave end to Morus and Hippotion. Teucer to fate did send Prothoon and Periphetes. Prothoon, Periphetes, and Hippotion. Teucer to fate did send Prothoon and Periphetes, Atrides javelin chased Duke Hyperenor, wounding him that Atrides javelin chased Duke Hyperenor, wounding him in that part that is placed betwixt the shoulder. Atrides javelin chased Duke Hyperenor, wounding him in that part that is placed betwixt the short ribs and the bones that to the triple gut have pertinence. The javelin's head did out his entrails cut. The javelin's head did out his entrails cut, his forced soul breaking through the wound. Night's black hand closed his eyes. His entrails cut, his forced soul breaking through the wound. His forced soul breaking through the wound. Night's black hand closed his eyes. Then Ajax, great Oileus' son, had diverse victories. For when Saturnius offered flight of all the Grecian race, not one with swiftness of his feet could so enrich a chase. For when Saturnius offered flight of all the Grecian race, not one with swiftness of his feet could so enrich a chase. Then Ajax, great Oileus' son, had diverse victories. For when Saturnius suffered flight of all the Grecian race, not one with swiftness of his feet could so enrich a chase.